This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Joining us today is George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals, after the company provided an update on the Zulu lithium and tantalum project, along with amendments to the offtake and prepayment agreement with Canmax Technologies. Well, thank you very much for joining us again today. George, how are things generally?
Yes, Mark, it's nice to chat to you. I'm feeling much happier. Now that we are not in dispute with Kenmax. I think that's an extremely important step forward. And with each day, we get a better understanding of where we are with the plant and what needs to be done, and much more confidence in what we're doing and the production of spodumene in commercial quantities.
Well, of course, rectifying those sort of negotiation problems, let's say, with Canmax, to see that they have been concluded is very good. You've reached the agreement to amend and reinstate the prepayment and offtake agreement, and both parties have agreed to withdraw the force majeure that was in effect. Just on the force majeure, George, of course, we spoke about that, and that was instigated on the issues around the milling circuit, and you had about 14 weeks to sort it. I thought that might have been lifted once those issues were sorted, but you've obviously agreed mutually to lift that force majeure status immediately.
Well, we have. We had always felt that the remedy to the force majeure situation was going to take place in two steps. And that one step was going to be concluded round about now, and that the second step would only be concluded at the end of the year. We had felt that the first step, the first conclusion, would allow us to be producing, and we had an estimate from our friends at Stark Resources in terms of what they expected that to produce. And then the second step would allow us to get up to the full plant design. So I think that where we are with this agreement is a little bit of a compromise between both. And I'm comfortable that the force majeure is lifted, although I must say that all the circumstances associated with it are not remedied. But I do believe that within the time frame indicated in the RNS, that the first part will be adequately remedied, such that the forecast production is going to be achievable. The remedies are largely in the plant supplier's hands, but we're getting involved much more hands-on and actively. And I think it's as a result of that that I have a better level of confidence now that this interim target is going to be achieved.
Okay. And that first element then, that's to do with the EDS mill, but also the milk from RHA, is that right? And the second part would be the bore mill later on in the year?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
The original first step involved the installation of the hydrosizer. And we understood that that would allow us to produce in adequate commercial quantities. Well, it hasn't got there. And along the way, it became clear to me that we needed an additional milling step in this. Mm-hmm. So I took the decision that the rod mill at RHA, which was in good condition, I mean, we maintain RHA's plant in care and maintenance. The rod mill was in good condition. We'd recently relined it and so on and so forth. And that rod mill could then be relocated in short order to Zulu. And that could definitely supplement the milling circuit.
Okay.
So that's really what it is. I felt that it's much easier to stop the plant running while we deal with the civils and other work associated with getting it in, and use that opportunity to completely go through the entire plant anyway, whatever fixes, whatever
Okay.
repair there's been, and so on and so forth. Bring everything completely up to scratch.
Okay.
Get the rod mill in, and then really just be in a much happier position.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned there, and in the RNS, the operations have been temporarily halted pending the installation of the mill. And as you mentioned, a full kind of walkthrough, if you like, an inspection of the plant while you're at it. I know you're going to site in a week or so, so hopefully you can get a good idea of what's going on. Maybe we can get a bit of a catch up from site, from what you've seen after you've had a few days to have a walk around. But what is the progress as far as you're concerned at the moment with the rod mill? When is the realistic arrival date to Zulu, and how long will it take to install and ultimately optimize?
Look, the components, the dismantling and so on is complete. The actual logistics of getting this thing moved, it's not a small piece of kit. And there has been some deterioration in the road to RHA as well. So the actual movement of it is a little more difficult than I had anticipated. But it doesn't matter that much, because in the interim, we are working on the civils, the new base structures and so on that all need to be cast and reinforced and so on. And all of that needs to be completed in any event before you can put the rod mill down. So that's not causing a delay in the overall schedule. The additional work required is linking it to the system. There will be additional pumping required to move slurries from the mill back into the hydrosizer feed tank, and to move material from underside of screens into the mill, et cetera, plus the electrics, the electrical controls, the integration of the mill into the overall control system and data acquisition software and management that exists on site. So there's quite a lot of work to be done in that area. And that's really where the timeline comes in. It's tight, and we're going to be working very hard, but it's realistic.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to go to site and be able to kickstart whatever needs to be done.
When you say it's tight, because of course you've got the November deadline now as part of the new agreement, that gives you the whole of September and a couple of weeks of August. Well, I suppose as well the whole month of November. I guess the timeline is by the end of November to have that. Is that correct? So you have got 2.5 months, but you say that is realistic. Are there any contingency plans here, George?
Look, there's contingency built into it already. The intention is to have production in October.
In October,
yes, and the original negotiation with Kenmax, which has actually been conducted in a really cooperative environment. We've had a really cooperative. We're back to where we should be with each other in terms of this. And the original first shipment date was 1st of October. And I've said I need a contingency built into this, relative to historic performances and so on. So there's a month built into it. The original expectation was we'd be producing and able to ship by the 25th of October, which is the date. So I'm reasonably confident that this is quite realistic.
Okay. So production by the 25th of October, that's what you'd like to see?
I want to see production before the end of September.
Before the end of September, okay.
I want to see this thing back installed working before the end of September. That's where my timeline is. I'll go and fight to whatever extent I have to fight to try and achieve that. Okay. So I'm hoping that we'll be well in advance. But in case we aren't, there is contingency and there's space there.
Okay. And then the bore mill is still, that's under Stark's control, that will be coming, well, towards the end of the year, early next year?
I think towards the end of the year, yes.
Towards the end of the year, okay.
That's very much theirs.
Okay. Indeed. Well, of course, as you mentioned there, you want to, well, the agreement is to start to send at least 1,000 tons of lithium every month starting in November. Can I ask how this negotiation agreement was negotiated? Because originally, of course, nameplate throughput is 6,000. I know we talked about optimization getting to 125%, which would be about 7,000 tons. And the previous the previous agreement was calling for 4,000 from June. So this is clearly a much better deal for Prem. You have to deliver significantly less than what the original terms of the agreement was, but it's still very much behind that nameplate throughput. So can you give some ideas, some context as to how this agreement was negotiated? And of course, when you want to get to that nameplate throughput?
Look, I think underlying all of this is the fact that there was a force majeure situation that arose that was not under my control and it wasn't under Canmax's control. And I think the initial reactions that we all have to that, is to kind of get a bit agitated and so on. And I think that's what you saw. And I think there was a bit of knee jerk on both sides. And at the end of the day, our objectives are so closely aligned. Kenmax wants SC6. That's what they want. They want spodumene. We want to produce spodumene. And us sitting and having an argument on the periphery of this wasn't getting anybody anywhere. Whereas the focus should have been on what do we do to get spodumene as quickly as possible? How best can we deal with this? Prem's always been conscious of the fact that there's a big prepayment that has been made. It's a serious obligation on Premier. It's a moral obligation. It's a factual obligation. It's an obligation in every respect. I beg your pardon, Mark. Sorry. I'm trying to throw it away. It's a very serious obligation on us. And we're conscious of it, and we want to get this thing dealt with. We want to supply the spodumene as quickly as we can. And I think that Kenmax needs to have some certainty and some reasonable projection that is realistically attainable under the circumstances we find ourselves in.
Okay.
So once we all sat down and got our heads around this kind of thing, I think the negotiation was relatively easy. I think Canmax's commercial representative and Brendan, who led the negotiations, have done a great job between them. Everybody would always like to have something more or whatever it might be somewhere. But I think that we should all be quite comfortable with what we have.
Okay. That's good to hear. It's good to hear that the people are feeling much more realistic about the situation, and of course, working together. That's very important there. In terms of getting to the nameplate throughput, though, George, I know we perhaps don't want to dwell on it too much, but is that something that we'd have to wait for an update from Stark as to when they think they can deliver that?
Well, an update from them, an update from me, just as much. That is going to have to be delivered by the end of the year. I can't.
Okay.
I won't accept. I just won't accept anything other than that.
Okay.
It really is as simple as that.
Okay.
I must say that it's possible that we could make some modifications to the RHA rod mill that is coming in. And we're looking at some of those. It may be possible to speed up that mill. It may be possible to convert it from a rod mill into a ball mill. And it may very well be that we can get a significantly improved throughput from that rod mill. That may be the case. Okay. I'm not quite sure. So we could find that just the rod mill is going to give us better than we expected. The other thing that is really very pleasing at the moment is that in the open pit, we're largely through the weathered zone. We're into much more competent ore. I've made reference to this before. We know that the mineralization is good. There have been enough assay reports over the years and so on, enough expressions of comfort from my own internal teams. And what we're seeing is good and competent. So it's possible that we may just exceed our own expectations.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I just want to touch briefly on the flotation section of the plant, because we talked about that last time, didn't we? And there was something that was discussed that Stark had managed to get the product that they wanted to get out, but we couldn't really comment on it at the time. And of course, you are wanting to refloat some of the material already processed. Do you have any update you can share on how the flotation is going with the reagent section, and if they're managing to get the SC6 grade that they want?
Look, let me make this point, and I want to refer all the way back to 2017 when we first published, and it remains in the public domain and it's available, when we first published test results of work that was done. At that point in time, it was reported that this deposit could produce spodumene at a 6.5% Li2O content with very low iron, and that this fell clearly into the technical grade normally associated with glass making and so on, and that this was completely competent in terms of recovery of spodumene, etc., etc. Mark, that was load shedding that kicked in South Africa. Fortunately, my generator has come in and the various other backup systems appear to have worked very well. Okay, maybe thanks to an odd lithium battery somewhere. Anyway, so it's clear, it's been in the public domain for 6 years that this is what we can do out of this deposit. We remain, there's absolutely no reason at all for me to think for one moment that this deposit is not going to be able to continue to produce and produce regularly what the test work demonstrated from as far back as 2017. Now, within the flotation circuit as it is, it's necessary that the correct tonnage of correctly sized material is passed into the flotation circuit for it to function correctly. And there's been a lot of discussion about this. I think I've explained this previously, that this is where the problem lay. So until adequate tonnage and adequate density is achieved in the mica flotation section of this plant, the plant is not going to remove all the micas, which includes lepidolite, before we start floating spodumene. The result of this is that the spodumene concentrate that the plant has floated is contaminated with micas and lepidolite. Now, when we look at an XRD analysis, XRD determines the makeup of the different minerals contained within this. When we look at an XRD analysis of the concentrates produced, this has in varying percentages, but 50% of the concentrate is spodumene. Now, to relate that to a specific grade, one would need to look at probably 65 to 70% of an XRD analysis to equate to of the order of 6%, 6 point a little bit more percent of lithium oxide equivalent. But contained within that same concentrate is 30% in micas and lepidolites. Now, if the micas and lepidolites are removed from the concentrate, that in itself will see an increase in the percentage of spodumene.
Mm-hmm.
That underlies the fact that those concentrates that have all been produced and milled need to be refloated. And on refloating, we expected to see the densities improved and the micas and lepidolites removed. So that's where the flotation circuit is at this moment in time.
Okay.
In summary, no reason at all to think for one moment that anything has changed from 2017 to now. And spodumene at grades of up to 6.5%, very low iron, those should be expected. And we have no reason to think anything has changed at all. Firstly, and secondly, because of the low density situation, those concentrates that have been produced need to be refloated to refine further, remove the micas and lepidolites, and leave the spodumene.
But do you know how Stark are getting on with actually optimizing that process? I mean, are they able to even keep running tests on that and optimizing that whilst the main plant is shut down if there's some stockpiled ore to process? No.
What is required before the flotation plant will work properly is sufficient tonnage of material in the right size fraction.
Okay.
So that's what's been short on the milling circuit. Once the ball mill, the RHA mill is in, then we can add back this material previously floated and put it through the circuit.
Right. Okay. And that's when you can get an idea of how that is working and where to optimize on the flotation section if needed.
You know, Mark, I've said it a couple of times now. There's no reason to think that there's anything different between then and now. You know, that really is where it is.
Okay. Well, just moving on to talk about the settlement, just with this new agreement. I understand that if Prem fails to make or meet the supply obligations or make cash settlement, Canmax has two options. They can carry forward the outstanding balance with increased interest, which is running at 8% per month, or settle new ordinary shares of Prem based on a predetermined conversion price. So this actually doesn't happen until sort of April 2025. In a worst case scenario, that would be when that could potentially happen. But is it fair to say that in a worst case scenario, basically the situation is that Canmax can get 17% of Zulu by 2025?
Yeah, something along those lines. That's the worst case scenario.
In a worst case scenario.
That is the worst case scenario.
Okay.
And I think that this underlies the fact that the objectives of everybody, ourselves and Kenmax, is not to try and have some kind of a punitive thing, not to try and change this prepayment into some kind of a debt structure or something like that. The whole objective of this thing is that we produce spodumene in reasonable prices and quantities to facilitate Canmax's operations, which are the production of lithium hydroxide and batteries.
Indeed. Okay, excellent. I just want to come on to the funding situation before. I've got a few shareholder questions to get through there. But on the funding situation, George, has the 2 million loan that you made available, has any of that been drawn down already?
Mark, if you don't mind, I'm not going to get into anything to do with the with my my loan and so on and so forth. If you don't mind for this moment.
Okay.
I expect that there will be updates, announcements, and so on in the very near future in regard to it.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I'm not going to go into that one.
On your loan, that's okay. In terms of the funding situation, of course, the SGM did pass the resolutions there to raise the ceiling, so you can issue more shares there. Are you able to cover the cost, the cash flow, until you get to that targeted now 1,000 by, November?
Mark, we've been very clear that we need to raise some funds. And nothing has changed in terms of that. What I find very encouraging at the moment, and obviously there's no announcement or anything like that right now, what I found it to be incredibly encouraging are the number of people who are coming forward and who are wanting and who are indicating to us that they have a desire to invest in this company. I'm very encouraged. Prem is going to need to raise funds. We've been very clear about that. But there is no definitive decision that has been taken right now. We need to assume that we have taken no particular decision right now in terms of anything to do with putting some more money into the business. Not today.
There's no decision being made. Okay, but if needs be, you can cover OPEX if needs be until you hit the production, until you get into that first delivery.
No, I can't. No. We've been very clear that we can't. We can't carry this company and ensure that Stark continues to do what they have to do and meet full operational expenditure, which will be back again, and we'll be back on full OPEX costs from sometime in September. That can't be done out of the existing cash that we have, and that's the point that we've made very, very clearly.
Right. Okay. That message is clear. So, just a few shareholder questions to finish off, George. Any information why the RUS or indeed the lab tested SC6 grades have not been mentioned? Apparently, they were mentioned during the Zoom call on the special general meeting. So is there any reason why you're not able to provide more information?
Mark, we have a very strong internal view on our resource and the resource base and resource structure at Zulu. We are using an external consultant to do the overall compliant reporting and so on and so forth. That is taking time. The other thing is that we continuously are adding to this database. What has concerned me all the way through, and if I go back 18 months, 2 years ago, I think you'll find commentary about it, is that internally our GOs have always indicated that they are comfortable that we have sufficient resource at economic recoverable grades within the area and within the pit that we are using to support this mining operation and this plant that we have at the moment. And that situation hasn't changed. I really, if I may, I'm going to refrain from saying very much more in regard to it, other than to repeat that we remain internally completely competent and confident in what we have, the magnitude of it, right? And where this, at a point in time when we can get complete, unanimity in terms of how it's going to be reported.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure the question will keep coming up, but as soon as you can get it out, I know you want to. Do you know, the question came in here, why the 2,000 tons promised by Stark has not worked out as it was promised without the upgrade? Do you know the answer to that?
The 2,000 tons was anticipated after the installation of the hydroclassifier.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst the hydroclassifier has improved the throughput of correctly sized material, it has not allowed adequate of the correctly sized material in the correct liberation size to hit the flotation plant. It simply did not meet the expectation that Stark had, and that is why, as an interim measure, I am moving that ball mill in as quickly as I possibly can to make sure that we do what was said we would do.
And on the Stark situation there, if that's not met what they expected, it, of course, the EDS mill was an issue as well. How confident are you that Stark can meet these new deadlines and you don't have to once again declare a force majeure?
Look, I don't believe there's going to be any more force majeure. I think that we're beyond that one at this stage. Whilst the conditions haven't fully lifted, I don't want to go down that road. And I don't honestly think that with our relationship with Kenmax, there's a need for us to go there. If we're going to have problems, we'll sit and have a further negotiation and discussion with them. But I don't anticipate it. So I'm pretty confident, and going back to some of my earlier comments that we spoke about, I'm pretty confident that the initial 1,000 ton a month that should be shipped during the course of November is going to be met.
Okay.
As I've indicated already, the original date was during the month of October. I sought the extra month. And I do feel that I'm comfortable that that is going to be met.
Okay. And does that 1,000 ton need to be SC6 grade, or could it be sort of 5.2%, just lower?
I think I've already said that the anticipated grades are between 5.5 and 6.2. That's the target.
That's the target. Okay.
So when it goes higher, that's a discussion that we haven't had yet.
Okay.
That's a discussion still to be had, because I expect to see quite a bit that's significantly higher.
Okay. Good. Is there any current product SC6 waiting to go?
Not to be shipped, no.
Not to be shipped.
No, I've indicated that. I've discussed that. What concentrates are there, I do feel need to be reprocessed.
Yep, that's okay. And in terms of processed ore waiting to go through the back end of the plant, we've covered that. You need to get the throughput going before you can start going to the foot.
I mean, I've got so much ore in various stockpiles, mined, sorted, partially sorted, partly milled, undersized material, material taken out of the milling circuit in an open circuit environment. There's such a huge tonnage of material waiting to be fed back into the milling circuit at the moment.
Right. And it all depends on that milling circuit. Okay, but there's a lot. I can imagine there's lots of stockpiles at various stages of the pilot of the production plant. Sorry. A couple more questions, George. We talked last time about considering a DSO. Have you had any more thoughts on that for some of the just a straightforward processed ore there?
Yes and no. I've expressed the thought that I think it may be possible to do it if we were to selectively use the upgraded material, the upgraded spodumene ore from the UV sorters. We could quite possibly end up with a stockpile of ore that could be running anywhere between 1.5 and 4%, I suppose.
Okay.
It would be very attractive.
Because you only have to give Canmax 50% of your production, effectively.
I hadn't actually thought of it in that context. I'm not particularly keen on exporting ore per se. I would much rather see it going through the flotation circuit and getting the proper value.
Okay, perfect. Okay. In terms of, we talked last time about the tantalum being extracted and needing a mag set. Now, someone asked here that tantalum isn't magnetic. So will it be an eddy current or something similar? And if so, when will that be there? It's quite a technical question.
Yeah, look, let me answer it this way, that there is some additional test work I've called for. Often there is an association with iron and with other that may be magnetic. And I'm waiting for some more definitive test work results to come back to me in regard to that.
Right. Okay. So we can wait to see some updates on that. A final question, George. We have covered it, but maybe just to summary off for this interview today, are you genuinely happy with the time you've got until November to meet the new agreement with Canmax?
Yes, I think it's fair.
Okay.
In fact, as I've already said a couple of times, the original requirement was less time than that. So I think that the time that we've got is as fair as we can make it.
Perfect. Thank you very much again, George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals, for your time again today. And good luck when you go to site next week. And maybe we can have a brief catch up on how things are. But for now, thank you very much.
Pleasure indeed, Mark. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.